Some marriages don't end because of a scream. They end because of a receipt, a folded piece of paper in a jacket pocket that was never supposed to be found. That's how mine ended, on a Tuesday afternoon in Denver, standing outside a dry cleaner I had no business being near. My name is Maren Whitfield. I'm 41. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, in a small blue house at the end of a gravel road, the kind of place where the fog sits in the valley until almost 10 in the morning. I teach 4th grade. I've taught 4th grade for 15 years, which means I've spent 15 years believing that if you pay close enough attention to small details, nothing important slips past you. I was wrong about that. I was wrong in a way that took me almost a decade to notice. My husband is Derek, 44. He sells enterprise software to hospital systems, which meant conferences, which meant Denver, Nashville, Phoenix, cities that blurred together into a rotation I stopped questioning years ago. We have a daughter, Nora, 10 years old, missing her 2 front teeth in a way that made her whistle slightly when she talked. She adored her father, with the kind of uncomplicated love kids give before the world teaches them to be careful with it. We'd been married 12 years. Good years, mostly. The kind where the passion cools into routine and you tell yourself routine is its own quiet proof of love. Derek was attentive in the ways that mattered to me. He remembered my coffee order. He called during his layovers. He never once in 12 years gave me a reason to open his phone. That should have been my first warning. Not that he gave me reasons to distrust him. That he never did. Not one slip in 12 years is not the same as 12 years of nothing to hide. It was Nora's idea to go to Denver. She'd drawn her father a picture of a mountain with a plane flying over it, and she wanted to hand it to him herself instead of mailing it. I remember thinking it was sweet. I remember thinking it would be good for us. A spontaneous weekend. Proof that our little family still knew how to be spontaneous. I booked the flights myself. I didn't tell Derek. I wanted to see his face. We landed on a Friday afternoon under a sky the color of wet concrete. Nora held her drawing flat against her chest the entire ride from the airport so it wouldn't crease. The hotel he'd given me the name of sat downtown, glass and steel, the kind of place where the lobby smells like eucalyptus and ambition. The woman at the front desk typed his name, frowned, and typed it again. "There's no reservation under Whitfield," she said. I told her to check the company block instead. The one his employer usually booked under. She checked. Nothing. The medical software conference, she added gently, had actually wrapped up the day before. I stood there holding my daughter's mountain drawing and felt the floor tilt slightly under me, the way it does right before you understand something you don't want to. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I told myself conferences run long. Phones die. There are 100 boring explanations for a silent phone. I have never been good at lying to myself, but that afternoon I gave it my best effort. We walked 2 blocks to a coffee shop to sit and think, and that's when Nora spotted him. Not walking into a hotel, walking out of a dry cleaner's, holding a garment bag in one hand and a small paper sack in the other, laughing at something, completely at ease in a city where he had no reason to feel at home. He wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, maybe late 30s, dressed like someone heading somewhere nice for dinner. She reached over and straightened his collar with the kind of familiarity you don't get from a work colleague. You get it from years. I told Nora to stay by the window and watch for a table, that I needed to make a call. Then I crossed the street. He saw me before I said a word, and I watched his face do something I'll never forget. Not surprise. Something closer to a man watching 2 separate rooms of his life collide, calculating in real time which version of himself he was about to have to be. "Maren," he said, "what are you doing here?" I didn't answer him directly. I looked at the woman instead. "I'm Maren," I said, "Derek's wife." Her face changed the way ice changes when a crack runs through it. Slow at first, then all at once. She looked at him. "Wife," she repeated, like the word didn't fit the shape of what she'd been told. Her name was Sabrina, and over the next unbearable 10 minutes, standing on a sidewalk in a city I'd never visited before that day, I learned that Sabrina believed Derek was a widower. She believed his wife had died 3 years earlier in a car accident on I-40. She believed he traveled to Asheville twice a year to visit his late wife's grave and to check on a daughter. He was slowly, carefully introducing to the idea of a new mother. I was the dead wife. My daughter was the child being introduced. Neither of us had been consulted. Sabrina pulled out her phone with hands that weren't quite steady and showed me a message thread going back 14 months. In it, Derek described our wedding photo as one he kept because it reminded him of grief, not marriage. He'd told her my name. He'd told her I existed in the past tense. I want to tell you my hands were shaking too, but they weren't. Something in me had gone very still and very cold, the way water goes right before it freezes. Derek kept saying it wasn't what it looked like, the way people do when it is exactly what it looked like. I asked him one question. How long? He didn't answer. Sabrina answered for him. 14 months, she said. Almost since we started. I walked back across the street to my daughter, who was holding a mountain drawing meant for a father who apparently didn't have room for both of his lives to be true at the same time. I told her the conference had ended early and Dad had already left for the airport, and that we'd missed him by a few hours. It wasn't the whole truth. It was the only truth a 10-year-old deserved that afternoon. We flew home the next morning. Derek texted twice during the flight. I didn't read either message until we landed. Here is the part nobody warns you about. The affair wasn't actually the worst thing I found. Back in Asheville, I did what I do best. I got organized. I photographed our joint bank statements. I pulled 12 months of credit card history. I found a savings account I didn't know existed, opened at a branch 40 minutes from our house, funded by transfers from our shared investment account that I'd simply never thought to question, because Derek had always handled the investments, and I had always trusted him to. $11,000 in January, $18,000 in April, $22,000 in July. Altogether, $91,000 had moved quietly out of our combined savings over 14 months, the exact span of time Sabrina had described. Some of it was jewelry. Some of it was a deposit on a condo Sabrina believed Derek co-owned outright, purchased under an LLC with a name that meant nothing to me and everything to him, and in a folder buried inside a cloud account we'd shared since our wedding. Meant for photos, I found something else. A death certificate, mine. Forged. Amateurish, if you looked closely, the kind of document that would fool someone who had no reason to doubt it, and every reason to want it to be true. Derek had built me a grave I was never buried in, so he could build a life I was never invited to leave. I hired an attorney the following week, a sharp, unhurried woman named Priya Anand, who had seen versions of this story before, though she admitted mine had a wrinkle she didn't encounter often. Forging a death certificate isn't just grounds for divorce, she told me. It's a federal crime. I want to be honest with you. Some part of me wanted to burn his entire life down out of pure reflex. Priya talked me out of scorched earth and into something more useful. Documentation, patience, letting the truth do the damage on its own. Timeline instead of mine. The forensic accountant confirmed the $91,000 and found another layer underneath it. Expense reports. Derek had filed with his company for trips to Asheville that had never happened, reimbursed as client visits while he was actually in Denver building his second life. His employer's internal audit team did not take kindly to that discovery. He was terminated within 3 weeks, and the federal document fraud complaint Priya filed on my behalf. Once state and federal authorities confirmed the forged certificate, opened a separate investigation entirely. There was no scene in a courtroom, no dramatic gavel, just a series of quiet, exhausting meetings that ended 8 months later with a divorce settlement that accounted for every diverted dollar, a house that stayed in my name alone, and full custody arranged around what was actually stable for Nora rather than what was convenient for Derek. Sabrina, for her part, cooperated fully with the investigation. She had been lied to as completely as I had, just from the opposite direction, told a version of me that only existed to make room for her. When she reached out to apologize months later, I didn't have much anger left over for her specifically. You believed the story he told you, I said. I believed it for 12 years. Nora is 11 now. She still has the mountain drawing. She keeps it in a drawer, not thrown away. Not framed either, just kept. The way you keep proof that something was true even after everything around it turned out to be false. She asked me once if I was angry that we went to Denver at all. I told her the truth. I'm not angry we went. I'm grateful we did. Because the version of my life I was living before that trip wasn't actually my life. It was a story someone else was writing, and I'd been reading it as if it were fact. We rebuilt slowly. I still teach 4th grade. I still live in the little blue house with the fog that sits in the valley until 10 in the morning. Except now the quiet in that house is mine, chosen, not handed to me by a man who had already decided, somewhere in another city, that I was easier to grieve than to stay married to. People ask me sometimes if I ever figured out why. Why build an entire second life instead of simply leaving the first one? I don't have a clean answer. I only know this. A man who is capable of forging his own wife's death certificate was never actually protecting anyone from pain. He was only ever protecting himself from consequences. I flew to Denver because my daughter drew a mountain for her father. Instead, I found out I'd been buried alive in a story I never agreed to be part of, and I dug myself back out of it. One document, one quiet decision, one honest morning at a time. If this story stayed with you, tell me in the comments where it found you tonight. And if you don't want to miss what comes next, go ahead and subscribe. Thank you for spending this time with me.